dark corridors, whispers in the night, and a passion so forbidden it shook the very foundations of the church. This is the story of a woman trapped between duty and desire, forced into a life she never chose. A woman whose scandalous secret ignited one of the most shocking cases of betrayal, conspiracy, and murder ever recorded within the sacred walls of a convent. The tale of Sister Virginia Maria, the infamous Nun of Monza, is more than just a story of forbidden love. It is a chilling reminder of the silent suffering endured by countless women in history. Deprived of choice, bound by unbreakable vows, she became both a victim and a conspirator in a web of deception that led to disastrous consequences. What truly happened within the Santa Margherita convent? How did a cloistered nun become the center of a deadly scandal? And what price did she pay for following her heart in a world where such desires were considered a mortal sin? Stay with me as we uncover the untold truth behind one of the darkest and most scandalous chapters of religious history. But before we begin, if you enjoy deep historical investigations and shocking real-life mysteries, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Also, tell me in the comments, do you believe forced religious vows were a necessary practice to preserve moral order, or were they an unjust sentence against free will? Now let's begin. The year is 1575. In the aristocratic halls of Milan, a newborn girl lets out her first cry. Mariana de Leyva, daughter of the powerful Count Martin de Leyva, a man of immense wealth and influence. But this is not a joyous occasion for her mother. The fate of this child has already been decided before she even takes her first breath. She is not destined for love, freedom, or choice. She is a pawn in a much larger game, one dictated by the ironclad rules of nobility. Her father, like many of his status, sees daughters not as individuals, but as assets. And in 16th century Italy, there were only two paths available for girls of noble birth: marriage to a wealthy suitor, or a life dedicated to God behind the walls of a convent. But Mariana's fate is sealed before she can even understand what it means. Her father, unwilling to divide his inheritance among multiple children, decides that his daughter will be sacrificed to a cause far greater than her own desires. She will become a nun, not out of devotion, but out of obligation. At the age of 5, Mariana is placed under strict religious education. Every aspect of her young life is controlled, shaped, and molded to prepare her for her future role. She is taught obedience, silence, and submission, qualities expected of a woman who will soon be locked away from the outside world. She does not get to run through the grand estates like other noble children. She does not get to dream of a future outside these walls. Her destiny is written, and it is inescapable. By the time she reaches 13, her fate is sealed. She is taken to the convent of Santa Margherita in Monza, where she is to take her vows and abandon her worldly name forever. She becomes Sister Virginia Maria, but deep inside her the embers of rebellion still burn. Imagine being forced into a life you never wanted. Imagine knowing that beyond the thick, cold walls of the convent, there is a world you will never touch. For many young girls placed into religious life against their will, this was a reality. Some learned to accept it, others broke under the weight of it. But Sister Virginia, she chose another path, a path of secrets, a path of forbidden love, a path that would ultimately lead to scandal, murder, and destruction. In the beginning, she tries to be the perfect nun. She prays, she obeys, she submits. But as the years pass, the isolation gnaws at her, and the strict rules of convent life begin to suffocate her. The silence of the halls feels more like a prison than a sanctuary. She is not alone in her suffering. Many of the young women in the convent have been forced into this life, just like her. Some whisper in the dark, speaking of dreams left behind, of love never realized, of futures stolen. And then One day, something happens that will change the course of her life forever. He appears like a shadow, slipping through the cracks of her carefully controlled world. Giovanni Paolo Osio, a man of charm, wealth, and forbidden temptation. Unlike her, he has never been confined by rules. He moves freely, speaks freely, desires freely, and he desires her. How does it begin? A glance through the bars of the convent, a note slipped into her hands by a servant, a whispered conversation in the secrecy of the garden. No one knows for sure, but what we do know is that Sister Virginia, the once obedient nun, gives in to something far more powerful than duty. She gives in to passion. Their affair is reckless, dangerous, and utterly forbidden. In the dead of night, Giovanni finds ways to reach her, using allies within the convent to deliver letters, messages, and even physical access. The walls that were meant to keep her imprisoned have become nothing more than barriers to be crossed. And as their love deepens, so does the danger. The convent is not as silent as it seems. Whispers travel fast. Eyes linger too long. Suspicion begins to grow. And soon, Sister Virginia is not only carrying the weight of her secret, she is carrying something else. A child. A pregnancy within the walls of a convent is a crime beyond scandal. It is an abomination in the eyes of the Church, an unforgivable sin. If discovered, the consequences would be unimaginable, but Sister Virginia is not the first nun to find herself in this predicament. The reality of forced convent life means that many women have turned to secret affairs to escape their imprisonment, even if only for fleeting moments. And so, she does what others before her have done. She finds a way to keep her secret hidden. With the help of complicit nuns, her pregnancy is concealed, her growing belly hidden beneath the folds of her habit. When the time comes, she gives birth in secrecy, the child whisked away before dawn. And for a while, it seems as if she has escaped the worst. But secrets have a way of unraveling, especially when too many people are involved. One mistake, one careless whisper, that's all it takes. The walls of the convent begin to close in around her, and soon the truth comes crashing down like an unforgiving storm. The Church does not look kindly upon betrayal. And when Sister Virginia's affair is uncovered, it is not just her life that is in danger. Giovanni Paolo Osio, the man she risked everything for, is now a marked man. His crime? Not only defiling a nun, but conspiring to conceal a scandal of unimaginable proportions. The consequences will be severe. Imagine what she must have felt in those final moments before the secret was revealed. The pounding of her heart, the cold sweat on her skin. The knowledge that everything she had built, every lie she had woven to protect herself, was about to crumble into nothing. But the scandal does not stop at her. The web of corruption extends beyond Sister Virginia and Giovanni. The nuns who helped conceal the affair, the priests who turned a blind eye, the powerful men who knew of the sins happening behind closed doors but chose silence over justice. When the trial begins, it is not just a judgment of one woman's fall from grace. It is an indictment of an entire system built on hypocrisy. Before we continue uncovering the tragic fate of Sister Virginia and the dark forces that moved behind the scenes, take a moment to reflect. Do you think she was truly guilty, or was she a victim of a society that gave her no choice? Tell me in the comments what you think. And if you're as intrigued by these hidden scandals as I am, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more shocking historical revelations. The walls of the convent are no longer a sanctuary. They are a prison, closing in around Sister Virginia Maria. The whispers have turned into accusations, and the shadows that once concealed her secrets now seem to mock her with their silence. The Church has discovered everything. The love she once clung to, the child she bore in secrecy, and the lies she told to protect herself, all of it has come to light. But this is no ordinary scandal. This is a scandal that reaches the highest levels of religious authority. The honor of the convent is at stake, and more importantly, the power of the church itself. If one nun's transgressions are exposed, what will stop others from questioning the very institution that imprisoned them? This cannot be allowed. Sister Virginia must be made an example of, and yet she is not the only one who has sinned. The affair between her and Giovanni Paolo Ossio was not simply a love story. It was a conspiracy that involved multiple members of the convent. Some nuns helped her hide her pregnancy, others facilitated her secret meetings, and some, out of desperation, fear, or misplaced loyalty, committed far greater sins than she ever did. The church is prepared to take action, but Giovanni, ever the strategist, knows what is coming. He has seen how these scandals play out. The man is always condemned, hunted, and executed without mercy. He knows that if he is captured, he will not see another day outside of a prison cell. So before the church can move against him, he makes a desperate attempt to silence those who might testify against him. One by one, the weak links in the chain begin to disappear. Some are found dead, their bodies discarded like unwanted evidence. Others simply vanish without a trace. It is clear Giovanni Paolo Ossio is trying to erase every possible witness, leaving no trail that could lead to his own downfall. But the church is not blind to his tactics. They tighten their grip on the convent, interrogating every nun suspected of involvement. Fear spreads like wildfire. Sister Virginia watches as the women who once swore loyalty to her begin to break under the pressure. Some confess everything in an attempt to save themselves. Others plead ignorance, hoping to escape punishment. But the truth is inevitable. It is only a matter of time before she, too, is forced to answer for her sins. And then, the unthinkable happens. The church issues an official decree. Sister Virginia Maria, the once respected prioress of Santa Margherita, is to stand trial. But this is no ordinary trial. This is not a matter of justice. It is a spectacle. A public humiliation designed to strip her of every last ounce of dignity, to remind the world what happens to those who dare to defy the sacred vows of the church. The court is packed with spectators, nobles, clergy, and commoners alike, all eager to witness the downfall of the infamous Nun of Monza. Some whisper in pity, others watch with cold fascination, but all are here for the same reason, to see how far the mighty can fall. Sister Virginia is led before the judges, her once pristine habit now a symbol of disgrace. The charges against her are read aloud: fornication, conspiracy, deception, and the worst of all, sacrilege. Each word is like a nail in the coffin of her former life. She's given a chance to speak, to defend herself, but what can she say? That she never wanted this life, that she was forced into vows she never chose, that her only crime was following her heart in a world that denied her the right to love. None of it matters. The verdict has already been decided. She is found guilty on all counts, but her punishment will not be execution. That fate is reserved for Giovanni Paolo Ossio, the man whose crimes have now surpassed even hers. No, for Sister Virginia, a different fate awaits. 13 years, 13 long, unrelenting years of solitary confinement within the walls of the very convent that once concealed her sins. She will not be allowed to speak to another soul. She will not be permitted to leave her small, dark cell. She will spend every waking moment in prayer, repenting for the life she dared to claim as her own. And as for Giovanni, his fate is even more tragic. Hunted by authorities, he flees, hoping to escape execution. But he underestimates how far his enemies are willing to go. Before the church can sentence him to death, his own so-called allies turn against him. They lure him into a trap, and before he can even realize what has happened, he is assassinated. His body is discarded like a traitor's, his legacy reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. But here's the real question. Was Giovanni truly the villain of this story, or was he simply a man who refused to obey the rules of a system designed to control and suppress? And what of Sister Virginia? Was she a criminal, A sinner, or was she simply a victim of a society that never gave her a choice? As the years pass, her punishment becomes her salvation. Locked away from the world, she undergoes a transformation. The once rebellious nun becomes a woman of deep reflection and repentance. She emerges from her 13-year confinement with a newfound sense of purpose. Though she is given the freedom to leave, she chooses to stay within the convent, dedicating the rest of her life to prayer and service. And yet, even in her final years, the world never forgets her name. To some, she's a symbol of redemption. To others, a reminder of the hypocrisy that lurked behind the sacred walls of religious institutions. But one thing is certain: her story will never be forgotten. Before we continue to the shocking final chapter of Sister Virginia Maria's life, I want to hear from you. Do you believe she truly repented for her actions, or was she simply broken by the weight of her punishment? Tell me in the comments what you think, and if you're fascinated by these forgotten stories of history, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more gripping narratives. For 13 years, Sister Virginia Maria sat in silence, locked away in a small dark cell within the very convent where her scandal had begun. The outside world continued without her. The streets of Monza buzzed with life, the nobility attended lavish gatherings, and the church carried on its affairs as if she had never existed. But within the cold stone walls of Santa Margherita, time stood still. Her punishment was not only solitude, it was erasure. A calculated effort to strip her of her past, her desires, and even her identity. At first, the isolation must have been unbearable. The only sounds were the distant echoes of footsteps in the convent corridors, the faint murmur of prayers from the other sisters, and the occasional tolling of the monastery bells. No conversations, no companionship, no relief from the crushing weight of regret. Did she spend those nights regretting everything? Did she replay every decision, every stolen moment with Giovanni Paolo Ossio, every whisper of defiance against the life she had been forced into? Or did she find comfort in the silence? History does not tell us what truly happened in those years of confinement. We can only imagine. But what we do know is this: when she emerged from her cell after 13 years, she was no longer the same woman. The defiant young nun, the woman who once defied the church and risked everything for love, was gone. In her place stood someone else, someone quieter, someone resigned, someone who, against all odds, had found a way to make peace with her fate. Her punishment had come to an end. The church had allowed her to rejoin the convent, but with strict conditions. She was to live out the rest of her life in penance and prayer. She could never again hold a position of power. She would always be watched, always monitored, always reminded of the sins that had brought her to this point. And yet, something remarkable happened. When given the opportunity to leave, to walk away from the convent forever, Sister Virginia Maria refused. She chose to stay. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because something within her had changed. The walls that had once been her prison had now become her refuge. Was it true repentance, or was it simply that after years of captivity, the world beyond the convent had become even more terrifying than the life she had once fought against? For the remaining years of her life, she lived quietly, dedicating herself to prayer and contemplation. She avoided attention, avoided scandal, and faded into the background of history. No longer a woman of power, no longer a woman of defiance, just another nun among many, seeking forgiveness in the only way she knew how. But forgiveness from whom? From God, from the church, or from herself? The years passed, and her story became legend. Whispers of the Nun of Monza continued to circulate through the streets of Milan and beyond. Some said she had been a victim, forced into a life she never wanted. Others called her a sinner, a woman who had succumbed to earthly temptations and paid the price for it. But what is the truth? Was Sister Virginia Maria truly guilty of the crime she was accused of? Or was she merely a woman who had been given no choice in a world that demanded her obedience? And what of Giovanni Paolo Orsio? Was he a villain, a manipulator who led her into ruin? Or was he simply a man who, like her, refused to submit to the rules of an unforgiving society? Perhaps history has judged them too harshly. Perhaps their only crime was wanting something that was never meant to be theirs, freedom. And so we are left with a question that has echoed through the centuries, long after Sister Virginia Maria took her final breath within the convent walls. Was she a victim or a sinner? A rebel or a prisoner? A cautionary tale or a tragic heroine? Tell me in the comments. What do you think? Do you believe Sister Virginia Maria deserved her fate, or was she simply caught in a system that gave her no choice? I want to hear your thoughts. And if you found this story as fascinating as I did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more hidden histories and untold truths. Centuries have passed since the name Sister Virginia Maria was whispered through the corridors of the Santa Margherita convent. Her story, once the subject of scandalous gossip among nobles and clergy alike, faded into the background of history. But legends have a way of resurfacing, especially those steeped in passion, betrayal, and tragedy. Even today, scholars debate the true nature of her life. Was she a cunning woman who used her position to manipulate those around her, or was she merely a desperate soul seeking escape from an existence she never chose? The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. But what cannot be denied is the hypocrisy that surrounded her fate. The very institutions that condemned her were riddled with their own secrets, their own sins carefully buried beneath layers of power and influence. She was not the first nun to break her vows, nor would she be the last. The difference: she was caught. And in a world where a woman's virtue was considered more valuable than her will, the punishment was always swift and merciless. Her name may have been infamous, but she was far from alone. In the 16th and 17th centuries, convents across Europe were filled with young women who had been forced into religious life against their wishes. Some found solace in their faith. Others found ways to resist. The most daring, like Sister Virginia Maria, sought love beyond the walls that confined them. But few stories ended as dramatically as hers. Imagine what it must have been like, standing before the judges, knowing that every man in that courtroom held her fate in his hands. Knowing that no matter what she said, no matter how much she pleaded or argued, she had already been found guilty in their eyes. Her choices were never truly her own. Not when she was a child, forced into a habit before she could understand its meaning. Not when she fell in love, knowing that discovery would mean ruin. And certainly not when she stood on trial, reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale for other women who might dare to follow in her footsteps. Did she regret it? That is the question that lingers through history. Did she sit in her cold, dark cell for 13 years, tormented by what she had done? Or did she cling to the memory of love, refusing to let them strip that away from her? Some believe she truly repented, that by the time she emerged from her confinement, she had been transformed. Others argue that she had simply been broken, that the years of isolation had drained the fire from her soul, leaving behind a shell of the woman she once was. Perhaps that is why she never left the convent, even when she was free to go. Where would she have gone? What life could she have built for herself in a world that had already branded her a sinner? Staying in the convent was not necessarily an act of faith. It may have been the only choice she had left. But one thing is certain: the legacy of Sister Virginia Maria outlived her. The scandal of the Nun of Monza did more than ruin a single woman's life. It exposed a deeper truth about the corruption that thrived behind monastery walls. It forced society to confront the reality that these institutions, meant to be sanctuaries of purity and devotion, were often places of coercion, secrecy, and even violence. Her story inspired literary works, most notably in The Betrothed, I Promessi Sposi, one of Italy's most celebrated novels, in which Alessandro Manzoni immortalized her as a tragic figure. Though fictionalized, his depiction captured the essence of her struggle, the conflict between duty and desire, the suffocating weight of forced obedience, and the inevitable downfall that awaited those who dared to challenge the rules set before them. And so we are left to wonder, was Sister Virginia Maria truly a sinner? Or was she simply a woman who wanted what every human being craves: freedom, love, and a life of her own choosing? Tell me in the comments, do you believe she ever found peace? Or was she forever haunted by the choices she made? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you found this story as compelling as I did, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new deep dive into history's most shocking secrets. As the final years of Sister Virginia Maria's life unfolded within the convent walls, one question lingered over her existence. Had she truly been redeemed, or had she simply surrendered to a fate that was never hers to choose? Though she was no longer a prisoner in the strictest sense, she remained confined, both physically and spiritually. She had lost everything: her lover, her child, her position, and her name. She had been stripped of power, dignity, and autonomy. Yet she stayed. Whether out of devotion or necessity, Sister Virginia Maria never attempted to reclaim the life she once knew. Perhaps she no longer desired it. Time has a way of erasing the sharp edges of rebellion, smoothing them down until they become indistinguishable from acceptance. For some, this is peace. For others, it is simply resignation. What did she think about in those quiet moments of prayer? Did she remember Giovanni Paolo Ossio, the man who once risked everything to be with her? Did she wonder what might have been had they escaped before it was too late? Or did she, as the church claimed, come to see their love as a sin, a weakness that led her into ruin? We will never know. What we do know is that she lived out the rest of her days in silence, dedicating herself to a life of reflection and penance. She no longer sought attention, nor did she speak of her past. She became a ghost within the convent, a living reminder of a scandal that had once shaken the foundations of the church. And then, one day, she was gone. Her death came without ceremony, without grandeur. There was no lavish funeral, no mournful procession of nobility paying their respects. Just the quiet closure of a chapter that had been written in secrecy and shame. But history did not forget her. Centuries later, we still speak her name. We still tell her story. Why? Because it is a story that transcends time. It is not just about one woman's downfall. It is about the countless others who were silenced, controlled, and condemned by a system that denied them the right to choose their own fate. Sister Virginia Maria's life was marked by contradiction. She was a sinner, but also a victim. A woman who defied the rules, yet ultimately succumbed to them. A lover who dared to embrace passion, yet died in isolation. And so, we must ask ourselves, was her greatest crime falling in love, or was it daring to believe she could escape the life imposed upon her? Was she truly guilty, or was she merely human? Tell me in the comments, do you believe she deserved the punishment she received, or was she just another casualty of an oppressive system? Let's discuss. And if you've been captivated by this tragic and scandalous tale, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another shocking true story from history. There are so many more secrets to uncover, so make sure you stay with us for the next deep dive. Until next time.